All right. Well, as usual, I always say I'm excited about having somebody here. Today, I'm just as much excited, if not more, because we have my friend Tabitha here, and she is the guru of all gurus when it comes to housing and those seeking sober living, etc. There's lots of different names for this, and that's one of the things I want her to share is all the different types of housing and how they're categorized. But first of all, I know we're going to have lots of viewers for this. So first of all, Tabitha, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and like what your passion is, all the good things about you.
Thank you for having me here, Angela. It's always good to be with you. So I'm Tabitha Edwards. I am one of the directors and co-founders of Recovery Resources. We are a local nonprofit recovery community organization. We started back in 2018, really just with a passion to try to help make it easier on people coming up behind us into recovery. And it's morphed into multiple programs and multiple things, with one of our biggest programs being our recovery living program, which is a type of sober living. I am a mom of a very excitable and rambunctious 12-year-old boy who
I love it.
keeps me alive and keeps me going. Um, and I'm a member of the recovery community. I've been sober a little over 9 years. And just trying to show up in a way that I feel like not only keeps me sober and keeps me going, but also helps other people find a way to do it too.
Absolutely. And I have followed your all's journey for quite some time, and I continually am impressed about all the different things that you all are doing, and I just think it's amazing. And I hope that there's people that will watch that are even not from here. So, they may not know what Recovery Resources is, but they may know of a similar program in their neck of the woods that would be able to be helpful for their loved one. And so what I want to do today is talk with you about sober living, about recovery living, about all the different types of housing, and ask you just to give our audience some advice. And so we talked about some of the questions that we would ask. And the first one is, a lot of families hear terms like sober living or recovery housing, but don't have any idea what that means. So can you share with our audience what that means and what the different types of living situations are so that they know?
Sure. When we started doing this work, and we've talked about this a few times between our staff, I don't think part of the 10-year plan was not the number of mamas and daddies and grandmas and grandpas and sisters and brothers and children that we would talk to coach through this process, to help get their loved ones help. That wasn't really an anticipated thing that we would be doing, but it has become something that we do a whole lot, and it's something I love, to be honest. So sober living is basically where people live together with the common goal of staying sober.
Mhm.
So it takes on many shapes and forms. It started way back in the 40s and 50s, apparently, with just people deciding, hey, we don't want to live this way anymore. So we're going to live together and we're going to hold each other accountable for what we're
Yes.
doing. And so it's morphed into lots of different organizations and companies who operate it. One of the oldest and the one most people are familiar with is Oxford House. It's a worldwide sober living organization. And that's where we get into a little bit of the differences. So there are what people call democratically ran sober living homes. And so what that means is the people who live in those homes are responsible for themselves. They set the rules, they create the guidelines, and they hold each other accountable for what the expectations are in that home. And so it can be minimal or it can be pretty severe. It depends on the home and the structure that they've created for themselves.
Mhm.
There's also like a transitional living situation where people can be in between. Say they get out of jail and they want to go to treatment, but they can't go there quickly for whatever reason, a
Right.
bed getting scheduled, whatever. So they need a transition space in between that. or people who are getting parole and aren't quite ready to live on their own yet. So they'll go into a transitional space. Those places are not always required to have substance use history. Sometimes it can just be someone with criminal justice background. So
Right.
that varies in what their requirements are. And then you have something along the lines of what we do, and we termed it recovery living with intention. So we're more of a program. So we have a home. The men live together in that home who all have the common goal of wanting to get and stay sober. But we put a lot of safeguards in place. There's a ton of structure, and we have a pretty high supervision level. So we have cameras in our homes. We have staff that are in there every single day. We drug screen at least weekly and more frequently, depending on the need. And then we build in a lot of wraparound services. So we're making sure that anytime a man comes in and says, I've got this need, we
Hmm.
go, okay, how do we meet that need? Um, the beautiful thing about, I think one of the things that we do well, maybe better than about anything else, is we are not afraid to make connections and to get to know anybody and everybody who might potentially provide a service that will support the men in our program. So we're
Yes.
willing to work with any human. If they come up and they say, I can teach them to change oil in their car. Cool. Some people don't know how to do that. Let's
I do
teach
not
them
know how
how
to do that.
to do it. Right. So there, we try to make it comprehensive programming.
Mhm.
Um, there are programs that exist in the country that are more structured than ours. Um, and they can go all the way up to where someone lives in the home with the person 24/7. They're always supervised and always staffed. And so what I generally recommend when I'm talking to families is get to know the program that you're pursuing and see what is a good fit. You'll have faith based programs, you'll have 12-step based programs, you'll have fully secular programs. So you really want to know what's going to be a good fit for my human. Where do they need to
Yeah.
be where they're going to feel most comfortable and they're going to be supported in the best way possible for what their needs are.
Yeah. Right. So you mentioned sober living home. I'm just going through the terms: sober living home,
Sure.
Oxford House, which we know, transitional housing,
Yes,
um,
ma'am.
and you called recovery resources recovery living. Is that
Yes, ma'am.
recovery living? What are some other terms that people may hear and may not know what that means?
So sometimes they'll be referred to as halfway houses
Hmm.
or three-quarter houses, which
So
is,
what are those? Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, it's an old term that came from the parole board. Now, I could be misquoting that, so forgive me if I've got that
Sure.
wrong,
Hmm.
but that's where I think it was originated. And so halfway houses function similarly to the sober living model, but they usually have some sort of oversight.
Hmm.
I mean, even with Oxford House, there is chapter representatives that provide some oversight. They just don't tell them when and how and where to do things. So
Yeah.
it's just oversight. But the halfway houses are similar in model to that. And then the three-quarter houses are basically going to be a step up from those halfway houses. So they're going to be less supervision. So the
Hmm.
hope is that people transition through the process to get to where they can go back to independent or family supported living. Um, there are probably other terms, Angeli, but none of them are coming to my brain right
But
now.
that's
Those
okay.
are the big ones.
Well, all these housing, um, the different terminology, I know that they all come with a price of some
Mhm.
sort, like, monetary. I mean, what type of money is a family looking at to help their loved one live in a place like this?
Most of them are going to be, especially in the state of Tennessee, most of them are going to be a weekly rate
Hmm.
that pays for something.
Hmm.
Um, I can speak about the Oxford model because I am an Oxford alumni. When I got sober, I spent time in Oxford House, and they do what's called an EES rate. And basically, it is the cost of what it takes to rent the home and pay the utilities, and then they divide that up amongst their residents. And so
Okay.
each resident is responsible for that portion of the payment on a weekly basis. Um, Most all of the programs have some sort of move-in fee or intake fee, and those vary widely
Mm-hmm.
depending on what program it is. Um, and then the recovery living model is similar to the EES model, except it includes all of the additional programming.
Mm-hmm.
So normally, like with recovery resources, you're going to pay a weekly rate, and that's going to include all of your living expenses plus access to all of the staff, assistance with transportation, and access to all of our additional programming. So it really varies, and there is no kind of base rate or excess rate. It varies wildly across
Mm-hmm.
programming and how that looks. Um, in other states, sometimes you can get help with some of those costs through insurance, through Medicaid.
Oh,
But
wow.
in Tennessee, we don't have that access.
Right.
So what we do have here is grants that people can access. And
Mm-hmm.
so often they can access grants through treatment centers, outpatient providers. We have a whole lot of churches here in the Bible Belt
Right.
that help support people with maybe their move-in fee in their first week to get them on their feet.
Yep.
Um, and then things like UETHTA and those types of places will often offer some assistance for first month because technically the person is homeless
Yeah.
and needs the support to get established in a home.
Yeah.
So there are funding resources available, but they're not always easy.
So over the years, and we talked about this already a little bit before we started recording, over the years, I've had a million different family members and friends and loved ones of individuals coming out of jail, coming out of prison, coming out of treatment, looking for housing. And they're like, one of the big questions is, where do I start? How do I find something? Is this the right thing for my loved one? And I'm getting into a lot of questions, and you can answer whichever one you want. But the other
Sure.
thing the other thing they say is, how do I know it's legit? What are the red flags to look for? So share a little bit about that if you don't care. And I'm going to drive you crazy asking you all these questions, but your information is so valuable. We need it. So
I don't mind at all. Um, so to address the last question first, I
mhm.
suppose, is it legit? I think that's an important question.
Yeah.
Uh, we're pretty blessed up here in Upper East Tennessee because we're a small community and there's not a ton of, I'm going to call them pop-up providers, um, who just kind of pop up and say, hey, I'm going to open a sober living house.
Yeah.
For
Uh-huh.
the most part, what we have is people in the community who have a good reputation, who have some reputable experience, and they're trying to do something for our community. So we're blessed in that regard. When you get into bigger cities,
Mhm.
Knoxville, Nashville, you get a lot more of that pop-up provider situation where people are just like, hey, it looks like y'all are making tons of money in that sober living. So we're going to pop up one
Which is
too.
so not true. Which
Um,
is so not true.
it, it is not in
Oh
fact
my
true.
gosh.
It's hard to convince people of that. But um, one of the things that we're seeing and we're trying to push toward is some state certification requirements so
Mhm.
that people must be certified
Mhm.
to name and label themselves as a sober living
Good.
provider.
Mhm.
And that just means that there's some state supervision that comes in and says you're meeting these qualifications, and there's some supervision and oversight of that.
Is there such a thing like that in other states that's already in
There
place?
is.
Okay.
There is.
Mhm.
There's actually a few different ones. There's the National Sober Living Association, which is national. Oxford manages themselves through
Mhm.
their Oxford World. And then there's the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, and that one has a state affiliate in every single state. And so we have a affiliate of the Alliance of Recovery Residences in Tennessee
Mhm.
called 10R. Um, We've been certified with the National Sober Living Association since our first year of doing housing because we wanted some sort of accreditation. Um,
Absolutely.
and where we recently opened a house in Virginia, we're working with the Alliance of Recovery Residences, and we are in the last stage of certification for them. And then we'll be moving toward additional certifications in Tennessee. And so there's lots of legislation in there right now that's pushing to require that, and we're in support of it. We want to have a choice as to who certifies us. Um, but we definitely think that it's in everyone's best interest for people to be certified so that parents can feel better about it being legit. Um, when I'm talking with
Oh,
families, I often try to end some of what we talked about before with the needs of the individual.
yeah.
So if they're heavily invested in their faith and they're worried about missing out on building their faith in recovery, then, I'm going to recommend that they find a faith-based provider where they can lean into that. Um, if a person is coming out of prison and has spent most of their life incarcerated or being raised by the system, then I'm going to recommend they have a little more structure and supervision because that's what they're used to and that's how they're familiar. So it really varies. I try to get to know the human and get to know the family to see how to recommend that and what place would be best for them. Um, and I feel like you asked a question before that and I've totally forgotten it.
Hey, that's okay. I don't even remember. So, so what are the common struggles? And I think, you know, most people would probably put together a list of things that they would think is correct and probably true. But what are the common struggles that men and women both face when transitioning from incarceration to sober living or treatment to sober living, and just trying to figure out how to live at that point? What are the biggest things that you see happening and that um, they're going to need support with?
I mean, I think it's kind of there's a big three, honestly. So it's generally employment, and transportation and that
Mhm.
housing piece. And so, we're doing everything that we can to give people an option in the housing piece, give them a safe space to be in. But that still leaves employment and transportation.
Mhm.
We're in rural East Tennessee, so we have yet to figure out and solve the transportation issue. There's lots of cool organizations doing their part to try to solve that problem, but it is forever an issue. And then of course the finances. And
Mhm.
so, we've done a really good job in our area of giving people an opportunity. Second chance employers are
Yeah.
everywhere. And if
Mhm.
someone is ready and willing to work, they can find employment.
Mhm.
But it's not always enough, right? It's not
Yeah.
always enough hours, or the pay isn't always significant enough. Um, and so I think helping people to learn to live within their means is something that the vast majority of our individuals struggle with. They either come to us with a history of being a drug dealer and having unlimited access to
Yes.
funds.
Mhm.
They're either really flush or they have nothing.
Mhm.
Um, and honestly, going into sober living from either of those circumstances means I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
Um, so we spend a lot of time on budgeting. We try to provide for basic needs so that those are not an issue. Everybody has all of that. And then we talk about prioritizing what's next. What do
Mhm.
we need and want to do for you so you can get where you need to be?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the men that we serve and the women that I encounter personally in recovery, because I sponsor a lot of women, um, they really just don't know how to human
Yeah.
in a healthy way. Um, Many of them have never experienced strong, healthy members of the opposite sex. So if it's a woman, she's never encountered a strong, healthy male presence in her life. If it's a male, he's rarely encountered a strong, healthy female in their lives. And so it's really about showing up for them in that way and teaching them that it's okay to have healthy relationships with people. And that includes boundaries, that includes a whole lot of love and connection, and it includes saying no sometimes with love. Um, and they're just not used to that. And so it's always interesting to watch people walk through that process and learn to lean into, I can be that way too. I can have boundaries. I can take care of me. And by taking care of me, I can love you better.
What do you find, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you share. What do you find with those that are first coming out of treatment or incarceration and into sober living? What's the percentage that think they have to have a girlfriend or have to have a boyfriend right off the bat? And we're told in recovery that at least that first year, hang tight. Do you be single? Try not to get into a relationship. You know, um, how should families encourage their loved one as far as that's concerned? Um,
Hmm.
from your experience.
So, my experience is a little bit different, honestly, than I think a lot of people's experience because my partner and I have been together 16 years and we have a 12-year-old boy and we've only been sober 9. So we came into this process together,
Uh-huh.
and everybody cautioned us very much in the same way. Um, and to be fair, we had tried to kill each other for 6 years before we got sober. It was super unhealthy, and so they had every reason in the world to tell us we didn't stand a chance and we were never going to make it. Um, when we come into recovery, we're virtually asked to give up everything, give
Mhm.
up our drugs and alcohol, which is often our security blanket. It's our best friend, it's our lover, it's our confidant. We have to give that up. We're often suggested that we need to change our eating habits and change our sleeping habits and stop smoking and stop dipping. And then we're told, hey, by the way, don't have a relationship.
Mhm.
And I have a different take on it, obviously. What I tell people is, I'm never going to be the one to tell you not to have a relationship because we also tell them the opposite of addiction is connection. And
Yeah.
so it's really kind of um, it's just a contrary statement, really, if we
Mhm.
look at it honestly. And so I just tell them, recovery has to be number one. And it's not abnormal to have relationships. It's not abnormal to want to have connection. It's certainly not abnormal to want to find some good feelings. And those often come from another human. Um, but we just can't make that the priority. And
Mhm.
so we have to be grounded in, if I'm going to ever build this relationship or turn it into anything healthy, I have to stay sober and I have to find a way to live that way. So I let families know that. Don't be shocked when they get a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It doesn't mean they can't stay sober. It's not the end of the world. It just means that they're seeking something because we've taken everything away from them. And
Yeah.
that's normal. It's part of the deal. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't caution against it. I just let people know we got to make recovery the priority.
Yeah. Very good advice. Um, this is not about housing, but family members and friends, they all want to help. They all want to help this person. And what's the best advice to keep them on the straight and narrow? They want to be supportive, but they don't want to enable that person. So,
Sure.
and I've asked all my speakers the same question because everybody has a little bit different take on it. So,
I think many of us, and I'm guilty of this, and many of my family members were guilty of this. We just don't know. We don't know how to help them and love them. And normally, by the time we have lived life with someone who is heavily engaged in addiction, the relationship is so unhealthy and the boundaries are way out of whack and nobody knows where you stop and I start and vice versa. Um, and so I usually suggest to people that we have to let them figure that out. The
Mhm.
person that you know and love in addiction is not necessarily the person that's going to come out on the other end.
Mhm.
The heart's the same, the soul's the same, but there's so many things that are different. And so giving them the space and time to grow and heal is so very, very important. Being able to, I think the therapist and the people way smarter than me call it detach with love. Um,
Yeah.
but it's not, it's not cutting them off. It's not ending a relationship. It's not even stepping away. It's just stepping back so
Mhm.
that I can have a better perspective of the entirety of what's going on and let that person have room and space to heal. Letting them know I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I love you, but I need you to be better. I need you to do what you need to do to take care of yourself. And the other thing that I encourage helpers to do, the people who want to help them, is you've got to take care of yourself. You've spent, who knows, decades maybe caring for this other person. You've sacrificed yourself, everything that you know and love to care for them. Now it's time for you to take care of you. And that comes with some guilt. People always have guilt associated with doing that. And so I try to walk them through that process based on my experience, my mama's experience.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, the thing that it's hard for all of us to do, and when I say all of us, I really mean the entire community, Angeli. We
Mhm.
um we often don't give people the space and time to grow in their capacity to help. So like when we start helping, we do it one particular way because that's all we know.
Yep.
And we do it to the best of our ability. But what we hope happens is after you've been doing this for a while, you have a lot of experience and you have a lot of circumstances that teach you and mold you to do it new and differently. And I don't know that we do a real good job of letting people walk through that process and giving them the grace to grow up in their
Mhm.
helping.
Mhm.
Because, the way I help people today still has the same heart and the same soul, but it looks different than it did 9 years ago.
Right.
And I hope that to be true for everybody. I
Oh,
hope
yes.
that
Mhm.
we grow and get better at it and learn.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Well, everything that you've shared has been so helpful, and I know that anybody watching is going to be like, rewind, rewind. Let me write this down, rewind, because it is. I mean, you're so eloquent in your thought processes and your delivery, and I just am so thankful. The last question, because I know you have work to do, so do I. We'll get off to our everyday lives, but um, for the family member, concerned person, loved one, what would you want them to hear? What would you want them to know? What would you want them to feel from watching this today?
There are numerous, and I mean numerous, resources and options for people.
Mhm.
No one knows where to start. So I think that if you can make one single connection with someone who's willing to start the process with you, there's somebody willing and available to walk you
Yeah,
through every step of the process. Don't give up. Don't give up. It's never hopeless. There is nobody who is beyond the option of recovery.
that's
They
right.
just have to be wanting it for themselves. And to all of those families who love someone, know that it's nothing you did and it's nothing you can do. That individual has to decide that they are done. And that decision doesn't always come by choice.
Yes.
Sometimes they're forced into that decision.
Mhm.
And so never give up hope and always be willing to reach out. And if the first answer is no, then ask somebody else.
Very good. Well, for those that are watching and you want a step-by-step resource guide of some few tips to help you get started, you can go to our website at hopeforthehelpers.com, hope with the number 4, and there's a free resource guide there you can just download and um, that may help you in some way if you're not local to where we are, and some of these resources don't sound, familiar. That sheet, that resource guide will help you get started. So again, we want to thank Miss Tabitha for being here. We want to give lots of kudos to her organization, Recovery Resources, here in East Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. Look it up if you don't know what it is. I want to thank you again. You're the best, and I just appreciate you and admire you so much.
Thank you so much, Angela. It's always good to see you.